This tape is being dictated by Ralph Jackson Nunley of Athens, Tennessee, and I'm taping this account of D-Day as experienced by the crew of a Marauder of the 497th Squadron of the 344th Bomb Group, and the plane that the crew was flying on D-Day, 6 June 1944, was 7ID number 295900. There was no nose art or name on the plane. The pilot of the crew was Robert W. Swaggerl, Schwaegerl. The co-pilot was Emmett Lancaster, Lancaster. The bombardier, last name was Wilstead. At this time I cannot remember his first name. The engineer gunner was Robert W. Hill of Knoxville, Tennessee. The radio gunner was Julian R. Wood, WOOD, of Rockmart, Georgia. The armor gunner was Ralph Jackson Nunley of Athens, Tennessee. The crew chief I cannot remember accurately or for sure, so I will not give his name. Some of the other crew members may. Julian Wood, I understand, has made a tape, and so he may have remembered the crew chief. Now, what do I remember about D-Day? As I recall, we did hear rumors around the 4th or 5th of June that something was about to take place, it seemed, and I remember that we were restricted to base, but I don't remember the exact date. The evening of the 5th, we were told that something was about to happen, and we were quite apprehensive about the situation, and we did try to get some rest. And as I remember, we were awakened, or at least called out about 2 o'clock or 2:30 on June the 6th. And soon after that, we reported for a briefing. I remember some of the details of the briefing, not a whole lot, and as an enlisted man didn't expect or didn't get the same kind of briefing as the officers. And after our general briefing, and if I remember correctly, we were addressed by Colonel Vance. I remember him chewing his gum rather vigorously, or that's my impression, that he was chewing gum, and then he mentioned a time or two that it was going to be a cakewalk, and he wished he was going with us. But after we got out to the plane, of course the pilot and other officers did tell the enlisted men a few more things. I remember that we were told that we were to fly in a certain direction, and that we were to shoot down any planes that were flying contrary to that pattern, regardless of their markings. And I took that very seriously. I don't remember all the things that were said just before we boarded the plane to take off on the mission. I do recall that at some point, and I think the pilot told us this, that we were to, and of course I'm sure it was in the briefing too, that we were to make formation, and we were going in at the normal altitude, 10 to 12,000 feet, but there was a possibility there would be a cloud cover that would obscure the landing beaches, and if this were true, then we would fall down to the lower altitude that allowed us to get under the cloud cover, and if that happened, then our ship, the pilot, was to take the lead, because it's my recollection that we had the low-level bomb sight, and I don't remember the pilot that was to lead the flight with the higher level bomb sight. But anyway, we did go up, the cloud cover was there, we did fall down to the lower altitude, and it's my understanding that we took the lead. And I remember my impression as we flew across the channel. Of all the equipment and material that was being transported across the channel, I got the impression that it was just like stepping stones in some of the brooks back here in East Tennessee. I had the impression that if one were so minded, he could walk across the channel on the ships and other floating material that was on the water. I remember seeing the honeycombs and the honeycombed structures that were being towed, and at that time it didn't occur to me what they were. I understand that they were part of the floating wharf systems, docks, so that they could be set up on the beaches. Before we boarded the plane, after we had talked as a crew for just a few minutes, I remember telling Julian Wood, who the radio gunner, that I had 1,800 rounds of ammunition in the tail guns, and that was my position at that time. Robert W. Hill had flown several missions as a tail gunner, but he and I had exchanged positions, and he was flying the turret position at that time. Julian Wood, the radio gunner, manned the waist guns, and I was giving him advice that I had more ammunition, so if he could spot anything that I could shoot at as we went in, well, I asked him to give me the opportunity to do so, to use up my ammunition. And as we made our approach, and as I remember, just about the time that we began the bomb run, the bomb bay doors were open, then I guess it would be number 3 man, the one that would have been on the left of the pilot, but since I was in the tail, he was on my right. The plane was shot down, and I don't remember whether it exploded. That's my impression right now, but I'm not positive. But I remember a friend of mine, a fellow by the name of Scott, who had been in the ordnance section and he'd been a tech sergeant, I believe, in ordnance, and he'd gotten in trouble back in Florida, and maybe he was busted, in quotes, of his rank, and he had become what we called a toggelier. He was flying in the nose and was to drop the bombs when the bombardier of the flight dropped his. And when the plane exploded, and I said this would have been on my right, but on the pilot's left, and I don't know whether the hit had caused them to change position and formation, get behind, or not. I just can't. But I remember Scott bailing out, and as his parachute opened, he had on what we call these limey boots. They were these sheepskin boots that just slipped on, and they didn't lace. And when his chute opened, his boots came off, and he waved as he went down. And of course I imagined that he was waving to me, but I don't know that he could even see me, or even knew for sure at that time what the plane was. And this was before we hit land. And just about that time, or shortly thereafter, I remember someone saying, well, we're hit, we've taken a hit. And it's my recollection that it was the hit in the right engine. Now, Emmett Lancaster, who has since drawn a picture of our plane as it went in, has the left prop feathered, but it's my recollection that it was the right engine that was hit. And then the pilot feathered the plane, and we made it from there on one engine. The altitude was rather low. I remember just as we made landfall, the tracer bullets started coming up, and I could see some of the barricades, the barbed wire, and some of the other things. And of course I couldn't distinguish for sure what some of these were. I could see some of the landing craft just approaching the beach, and it wasn't, they weren't far from landing time. And I could imagine that Scott had to land in all of that, and I doubt that if he lived until he hit the water, then I doubt that he lived long. We dropped our bombs as soon after we were hit, as I recollect, as we could. Of course, we were waiting to get to the beach and drop them so they would be effective. And I remember some of the conversation between enlisted men in the one thing that I remember, and I believe in our reunion in Dayton, Robert Swaggerl was talking about it with Julian Wood and myself. He remembered what I'd told Julian. Well, just as soon as we hit the shore, I started sending up these, I could see the tracer fire, and I knew they were firing at us, and I said, well, I started yelling at Wood, well, shoot them, shoot them, shoot them, because I couldn't bring my tail guns to bear at that time. Well, before we could use up our ammunition, the pilot gave us an order, and I suppose we were over the immediate landing area at that time. He gave us the order to start jettisoning some of the equipment, especially the ammunition. And we were taking to take the ammunition up and dump it out the bomb bay. And I remember that we were being shot at a great initially, and quite a bit of apprehension. I was pretty sure that if we were to get hit, we wouldn't have time to bail out at the altitude that we were flying. Whether this is true or not, I don't know, but this is my impression at this time, and I've had it for some time. But we were pulling this ammunition, and of course the tail guns that I was operating, they had minus the few rounds that I'd fired, 900 rounds in each for each gun, 1,800 rounds approximately. As I remembered, the waist guns had 300 rounds each, and then the guns up forward. I think at that time that Hill was still in turret position. Seemed like I don't know who was throwing ammunition out from up front, from the guns along the side, but they were lighting the ship at the pilot's orders. The ship was at a very critical angle. I can remember that. I thought it was just near stalling angle, and I had that feeling, and we'd pull out this ammunition. Of course, I had to crouch back in the tail to do it, and hunched up on my knees, and we'd pull up what we could handedly carry and break it off, and then carry it up and dump it out of the waist windows. And at some point, we some of the ammunition up front was being carried back and dumped out of the bomb bay. And I remember during some of this carrying, and how long it took to do it, I have no idea. But I remember hearing this banging noise on the side of the plane, and I thought, oh Lord, we've been hit and the plane's coming apart, because it was a terrible noise on the skin of the plane. And I looked out the waist window, and there was a long string of ammunition just flapping, and every once in a while the slipstream would cause it to come up and hit the body of the plane. It'd make this terrible sound, and I thought the front of the plane had blown off, and that is my first impression. Then I looked more closely, and I learned that one of the hits had knocked a big hole in the belly of the ship, and whoever it was that was dumping ammunition from the front had dumped ammunition through that hole, and a belt of it had gotten caught and was hung up in this hole and flapping. And soon after that, they released it, and it fell. And for most, after we got the ammunition thrown out, most of the flight, then the rest of the way, we dared not turn around, of course, and we were making it in the flight pattern and across Cherbourg Peninsula. And I remember us more or less just mushing along, was my feeling. And I don't remember being shot at after this initial encounter at the beach area where the invasion was taking place. We had thrown out just about everything that we could get our hands on that had any weight to it, and we got across the peninsula, and I remember someone, as I remembered, it was the co-pilot talking about the Isle of Jersey and the Isle of Guernsey, and identifying them as we flew across. And then we flew across just a small, tiny island. And I'm sure that in all the excitement and all, this was an oversight. We flew across this small island with a lighthouse on it, and they started shooting at us. And I understood from conversations later with the officers that they had been briefed to avoid these islands, that they were fortified and that there was a danger of being hit. But I don't think they did more than just shoot at us. Someone said later that Lancaster shot his .45 at them out the window. I guess that relieved some of the frustration. I'm sure it didn't do much for the people in the lighthouse or on that little island. We made it across the channel to an English fighter base, as I recall, and I don't remember the name of the base, and I don't remember all the details of landing. I remember that we landed, and it was a successful landing without accident, and we got out of our plane, and as we walked along and until we got to a place where we could sit, and I remember how my knees almost failed to work, and I remember, stories about being so scared that being weak-kneed, and I thought of that, but I think that it was more the squatting and pulling that ammunition under strain and the tenseness of the moment that caused it more than the fright. Not that I wasn't scared a great deal of that time. The apprehension was quite high and the adrenaline was flowing, I'm sure, at that time. I remember while we were sitting, seemed like near the operations tower, some GI came up and said, something must be going on over there today. And I remember the resentment that welled up within me at that time, at that statement, to think that he was there and observing all this and didn't put it all together. It was just beyond my comprehension at that time. Later on, it might have been afternoon before anyone came to pick us up, but I don't remember who it was that came to pick us up, but they came from our base at Stansted and picked us up and transported us back. The plane was left, as I remember it, until the next day, and it was picked up. I don't know all the details, of course, and some of the things that I heard, I'm sure I've forgotten. I want to make a statement at this time. It seems important for me to say that in no way do I think that this is necessarily an accurate account of what happened. This is just my recollection of what happened after all these years. And for many years I didn't think about it a great deal, except just it occurred to me, and I might not even check out the details, even when it did occur to me. I remember trying to get in the plane and skinning my leg, or anyway it was skinned up, and I don't know whether that happened during the time that we were flying across the peninsula or what, but I do recall that the pilot I think got the Distinguished Flying Medal for his flying the plane back on one engine. That's my D-Day experience. It was a memorable occasion historically. And I'm just amazed that we lost as a few air crewmen as were lost in that operation. This ends this account of D-Day by Ralph Jackson Nunley of Athens, Tennessee, whose address is 192 County Road 249, Athens, Tennessee, zip 37303. Now I need to put a postscript to this, I think, because in listening to it replay, it occurred to me that in the course of the story I said that they were throwing some of the ammunition out through the bomb bay, and I think this was inaccurate because the bomb bays were closed as soon as we dropped our bomb in order to get more lift and to prevent the drag, and they were carrying the ammunition from up front all the way back to the waist windows to dump it. And that's why that the person carrying the ammunition took advantage of that hole in the belly of the plane. It shortened his journey quite a bit. And I'm sure that this is a more nearly accurate account of what was actually happening. The bomb bays were not open at the time that we were dumping the material. I think I'd like to just put, I don't know whether a person listening to this tape is interested or not, but there was another event that is very interesting to me, and that is the story about Lieutenant Morrison's armor gunner. Lieutenant Morrison was shot down May the 10th on a mission to Mons, France, M-O-N-S, and his armor gunner, Lindsay Oliver, was one of my closest friends. We had known one another for several months. We'd gone through some of our training together before joining the outfit, and I remember the plane exploding and the bombs falling out, and I never did see any chutes open. So my assumption was that all the crew members were lost. And sometime later, after having been on past to London or something, I came back, and some of the fellows told me that the Red Cross had gotten word that Lindsay Oliver was a prisoner of the Germans. And then after the war, Lindsay and I corresponded for a few letters. We lost contact years ago, and I've not heard from him in years and years, but soon after the war, even after I came back to Tennessee, we corresponded. And in one of these correspondence, he told me about what happened when the plane exploded. He was a armor gunner that flew the turret, and he had his chest chute was lying in the plane near the bulkhead of the tail section. And I think that's what most of us did. I think I did this when I flew in the turret. I've about forgotten how we did do it. But anyway, he said after the plane exploded, he didn't remember getting out of the turret. He just was rather stunned, I suppose, or something because of the explosion. But when he came to his senses, he was on a piece of the belly floating down through the air. And he glanced over to one side, and there was his chest pack still lying on this piece of metal that he was on. And he reached over and got his chest pack and put it on and rolled off of that piece of metal, and he said the metal almost did him in because he upset the turbulence as he rolled off of it, and it just missed him. And he landed, and the target was a marshalling yard, and he landed on one side of the marshalling yard, and the resistance forces got to him, and he gave them, as he had been instructed, his escape kit and his .45, but his feet were badly burned, and as I understand it, through his boots and all. His feet were blistered, and he knew it by this time, so I don't know whether his boots were partly burned or what. I don't know that he described this in the letter. If he did, I certainly don't recollect it. But I do remember that he said his feet were badly burned, even though he had on, I guess, shoes and then flat boots over them, but I'm not sure about this. Sometimes we did wear the flat boots without wearing shoes, which I don't think we were supposed to do, but the resistance forces did advise him to give himself up as a prisoner of the Germans in order to get medication. And this he did, and he was for a period of time a prisoner of war, and was liberated by the Americans sometime later. But I thought that's one of the memorable events to me.
My name is Julian R. Woods. I volunteered for the Air Corps on December the 10th, 1942 at Fort McPherson in Atlanta, Georgia. And after 2 days there, they sent me to Keesley Field, Mississippi at Biloxi for basic training. After about a month and a half of basic, they sent me to radio operator and mechanic school in the Stevens Hotel in Chicago, Illinois. The Stevens today is called the Conrad Hilton. After a couple of 3 months at the Stevens, about I will say 4 months, they closed this as a radio school and sent us to sent our class to Sioux Falls, South Dakota, to finish radio school, which we did. And then in turn were sent to Fort Myers, Florida, to Buckingham Army Air Base, to gunnery school. And after gunnery, which lasted about 6 to 8 weeks, we were sent to various bases around the country, and I was lucky enough to get to go to Lakeland Army Air Base at Lakeland, Florida, and join what was to be, I think, the best air group in the whole Air Corps of medium bombers. I was sent to the 344th Bomb Group and assigned to the 497th Bomb Squadron. And joined the crew of Robert W. Swagrill, who was a lieutenant at the time and made captain later, which he very well should have, because this was one of the best crews, I thought, also in the Air Force. However, I suppose I'll get a lot of opposition there from the other crews. This crew consisted of Robert Swagrill from Cleveland, Ohio, the pilot, and Emmett J. Lancaster, at the time from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, who was the co-pilot. Leroy M. Wilstead from Salt Lake City, Utah, was the navigator bombardier. And yours truly was radio operator and waist gunner. And Robert W. Hill was the engineer gunner. And Ralph J. Nunley was the armor gunner. We flew around Lakeland and out over the Gulf of Mexico, down the Avon Park bombing range to practice dropping bombs, and out over the Gulf to practice gunnery, and I practiced radio transmissions back to the base and so forth, and in turn just learning together as a crew. And we worked together real well. After about approximately 2 months of this, we moved up to Hunter Field at Savannah, Georgia, to pick up new B-26 Martin Marauder bombers that were sent down from Baltimore, Maryland, where the Martin Marauder Company was located. And on checking out each position, my particular one was to check out the radio equipment, the pilot to check out the airplane as a whole and to fly it, and to iron out any kinks that were in the systems, and we found none, and it was a great airplane. The number of it was 429595500, and the radio call sign was 7ID. That was the squadron, 497th squadron designation, and 7-item dog was my radio call sign. After this, we moved down to Florida, down to, I think it was West Palm Beach. We took off the southern route for England, but we didn't know at the time where we were going. We were going to North Africa to be assigned either to Africa or England. We didn't know for sure. So we flew the southern route around. The first landing was Borinquen Field, Puerto Rico, and Next, we flew down to British Guiana, South America. From British Guiana to Belém, Brazil. Belém, Brazil to Natal, Brazil. And from Natal, we jumped off to Ascension Island, which was a dot out in the middle of the Atlantic. And from Ascension to Roberts Field, Liberia, near Monrovia, Liberia, and from there to Dakar, and from Dakar to Marrakesh, French Morocco. And each one of these places we would stop, spend a night, have the plane checked over and refueled and so forth, until we got to Marrakesh. And as I heard later, we were waiting. We stayed 21 days there at Marrakesh, waiting for the weather to clear to fly the planes on to England. However, we didn't know where we were going until we took off from Marrakesh and opened seal orders on a certain compass heading. And at the time, we didn't know where we were going, to the war in North Africa and Italy or to England. So we opened the orders and found we were going to Newquay, England, and proceeded on course for Newquay. And on landing there, we learned that our home base would be Stansted, Montfetchet. That's the name of the village that the base Stansted got its name for. We only knew it was Station 169. And at Stansted, by the way, there's a little story about Stansted that I was lucky enough to attend the ceremony that the Queen dedicated the airport at Stansted as London's third international airport. And they now have Gatwick to the south, Heathrow to the west of London, and Stansted is north, about 20-something miles. And I was invited by the British Airport Authority, and Stansted has the distinction of being the only airport in the British Airport Authority that had bombers fly off of it during World War II. So this should keep our history that we made at Stansted alive for generations to come. I hope very much that it does. For from Stansted, I think our group made quite a name for themselves through excellent bombing runs, and I was lucky enough to get stationed with one of the best outfits in our whole Air Corps. We had crew chiefs that were the best on those engines and the planes as a whole. We had pilots that they were the best. They were just the best that I know of. That's the reason I'm sitting right here talking to you now. We had all of these things going for us. How could we lose? After flying a number of missions from Stansted, we bombed targets over in France, Belgium, Holland. We bombed marshalling yards, German air drones, especially the air drones along the coast that would send fighters up after our heavies going far into Germany. And also we bombed no-ball targets, and none of us knew what no-ball targets were until after the war. They were until after we moved over to France and found that they were robot bomb sites. The V-1, which was a propeller-driven flying bomb, and then the V-2, which was the rocket bomb. And I think the English people tolerated us for having been doing such a good job in wiping these things out. They still sent quite a number of those over England, and I think they loved us for bombing them back. D-Day was my 39th mission, and which I think was by far the worst or the roughest mission out of my whole tour of duty in the ETO. We didn't know this thing was coming off. Nobody knew it but the top brass. And we were sound asleep. I was awakened about somewhere around 2 a.m. My whole barracks was awakened, and we were told we were flying a mission and to start getting ready. So we got out and was going to the mess hall to eat breakfast, and it was a misty, rainy morning, closed in. We thought, we didn't think we'd fly. We thought it was just would be scrubbed, the mission would be. And we got to the mess hall, and they had the usual powdered eggs, which after you gulp them down, they try to come back up. They push back on the back of your throat, trying to get back out. That's our normal meal in the morning, either powdered eggs or SOS. And I'll have to let somebody else tell you what SOS is. Anybody in the service knows what that particular meal consists of. But anyway, going out by the planes that morning, they had white stripes around the wings and around the fuselage, and that had been done during the night, and we knew something was coming off, something special, for all the planes to be painted like that. And then when we got to the briefing room and saw all the guards around with their carbine rifles and the MPs with their 45s, we knew something big then. And then when we entered the briefing room, we saw that they had a brigadier general in there. I've forgotten who it was, General Anderson or somebody. And then we knew something big was coming off then. And the briefing consisted of telling us what we had to do and so forth, and the curtain was drawn back, and the line went down to the Normandy coast and back, and we thought it would be sort of what we called a milk run, a light mission, and we thought we'd come back and visit the pubs as usual with a pass and the town. However, this wasn't to be, not for my crew anyway. We and not for the others either, for they flew 2 missions that day. We didn't get back to the base, so we would have flown the second one with them. The briefing went along fine until he got to the last line, and then he says that we were going to hit the target this morning. The invasion was on, and that we would have to hit the target even if we had to go under the cloud cover and our bellies on the water. This was sort of a frightening statement there, and I started thinking very seriously about sick call or something. However, if you had gone on sick call that morning, you'd have had a guard with you all day long, the rest of the day. So that was out. We went out to the planes. We were dressed in our flight coveralls and so forth, and got in the planes and taxied out for takeoff and so forth. And the weather was still so bad that we didn't see how we were going to make it. But anyway, we took off, and we did. And I understand that a lot of the planes couldn't find their formation, so they had to tag on to somebody else. And some of them had to turn back to the base. The weather was so bad. But we had a low-level bomb sight in our aircraft, and the lead plane had the high-altitude bomb sight. So we took the lead at our particular flight while we were out over the channel. And by the way, while we were out there, I've never seen as many ships in all my life. There were thousands out there. I've never seen nothing like that, and never will again, I don't suppose. These ships had most of them it looked like they were hanging from a barrage balloon. Of course, they weren't. They all had barrage balloons over them, where I guess for protection against strafing enemy aircraft. After we got closer to the coast and saw that there was a cloud cover, that's when we took the lead of our flight and started in toward the coast. In the meantime, there was a line of ships, battleships, cruisers, rocket launch ships, firing away at the coast. And we went around their right flank and started in, and I was scared to death. I was afraid that their shells were going to shoot us down. We were going to run into one of them. But we didn't, and we proceeded on toward the beach. And in the meantime, I look back at this thing again, and it's a scene that I'll never forget as long as I live. There was a plane flying in front of the fleet, laying a smoke screen, and the fleet was just hammering away. And we turned into the beach. As soon as we hit the beach, tracers come from everywhere. I've never seen the like. It was still sort of in the twilight. It wasn't quite full daylight yet, and those things were coming from every direction, it looked like. And the ones that were coming toward us were coming from a sand dune back toward the high ground, it looked like. And I turned my guns, my 50s, and fired away. We were at 2,000 feet at that time, and it looked like that my tracers looked just as big going down at them as theirs coming up at us. I couldn't tell whether I hit anything or not, but as we passed over, the guns quit firing, but they had already done their damage to our flight. They had hit us 3 times direct and knocked our wingman down out of the sky. He had gone down, and I didn't see any shoots. I don't think anybody got out. However, there's some say that they thought they saw a chute come out, but I didn't. Anyway, we had to drop out of formation and fly parallel down the beach and drop down to about 1,200 feet. And as we were flying parallel, I fired my 50s at what I thought was muzzle flashes from the high ground. And about that time, Bob Swagel gave us the order to lighten the plane by throwing everything out we could. And so I pulled the cotter pins underneath my guns, lifted them up, and dropped them out the waist. And the ammunition in the can above, all the ammunition was still in the feedway and fed out. I dropped both of them the same way, and then everything else we could get our hands on, flak suits and all of that paraphernalia that we had along with us was thrown out of the aircraft, and we got enough altitude to get back into the cloud, the cloud cover. We flew across the Cherbourg Peninsula in this cloud cover and come out on the other side where it was clear again over the channel. And while we were flying across the channel, we got too near one of the islands, one of the Channel Islands. I think it was Jersey or Guernsey or one or the other. Anyhow, it had a lighthouse sticking out on a point, and as we got near, all of a sudden they opened up with light flak at us, and Swagel had to turn away just a little bit out of range, and it was popping right off of our wing, but we didn't have anything to shoot back with at that time. So then he ordered me up front to send a direction finder, which I did, and I got a receipt for the message and was told to hold the key down so they could shoot a bearing, which I did. And also, in the meantime, flipped on the emergency IFF, identification friend or foe, equipment, and it was also operating. And as we were flying along, the plane was mushing, just hanging in the air, and we got everything off that we could. Some of it was a pleasure to throw away in the radio compartment. We had a freak meter, I think, that weighed about 100 pounds. It was a pleasure to get rid of that thing. I never used it all the time it was in there anyway. But the engineer gunner, Robert Hill, was hand pumping gas, transferring gas to the good engine. And as we approached the coast of England, there was an air-sea rescue boat coming right toward us. And as we flew over, he started making a wide circle behind us and head back for England. So we had gotten the service that we asked for by radio. And about that time, we crossed over the coast of England, and we're looking for a place to sit down, which wasn't very hard to find. They had air bases and emergency strips all over England, I think, especially around the coast. And Swagel called me up front and asked if I'd like to bail out. I told him no, I want to fly it in with him. And he also asked the other crew members, they also wanted to chance him taking us in. And he did. There was a landing strip that I've learned recently. The name was Warmwell, but it was a beautiful sight to see. Big wide runway and Swagel set that plane down just like he was setting it on a crate of eggs. It was a beautiful landing on the one engine. And we were afraid there were flak holes in the tire, which they weren't, much to our advantage. And when we rolled to a stop, there was a guard that come running up. I had gone back into the waist to see if anything else needed to be cleaned out back there. And this guard come running up, and he had his helmet on, and he stuck his head up in a flak hole, stuck his head up in the aft bomb bay, and hollered at me and says, "Hey, what's going on over there?" And I told him that all hell had broken loose, that the invasion was on. And he was happy about that. He says, "Well, we'll get this thing over with now and go home." And so they sent a car out to us to pick us up, and we went in, and Swagel made the report, and somebody showed me a bed, and I hit that thing, and I was exhausted. I didn't know I was so tired. They woke me up about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and they had sent a plane from Stansted down to pick us up. And they, in the meantime, had flown a second mission that afternoon. And like I said before, we would have flown with them had we been back to the base, but we just couldn't make it back. This is about the way I saw it, is a tech sergeant, 19-year-old tech sergeant, radio operator gunner on what I thought was the best crew in the Air Corps. And of course, we'll get a lot of opposition there from the rest of the 497th and the 344th Bomb Group. But I still say that I thought it was the best anyway. And at least we made it all right. Then we moved back to Stansted, and the next few days we were flying more missions. As I said before, that was my 39th. I had flown a mission or two with another crew as their radio operator was out sick and so forth. And but most of the missions that I did fly, I flew with my main crew, which was Bob Swagel as pilot, and Nunley gunner, Hill gunner, Stansted navigator bombardier, and Emmett Lancaster co-pilot. Emmett now has moved out to, after the war, moved out to Tempe, Arizona, and he's an artist, and he wrote me a letter that I would like to read to you on this tape. My wife and I went back to England in 1987 and visited Stansted, and I wrote to him about the trip and about how they had been so nice to us and treated us so well, and that the airport was changing, and that they were building there, and they had built a long runway and so forth. And so he wrote back to me what I thought was a classic, and as I say, I would like to read it to you now that you've given me this opportunity to get my foot in the door. He says, "Dear Julian Rupert Woods, Jr., they can build fancy towers and terminals, lengthen the runways and cover the hard stands with manicured grass. But very early in the morning, in Stansted, if you listen closely and the wind is right, you'll hear the cough and roar of engines starting. Peer intently into the morning mist, and you'll see the shadowy outlines of marauders rolling along the taxi strips, grass blown flat by the pipe wash. For you cannot have the intensity, the drama, the high adventure of 1944 without leaving ghosts behind. They are there, and they'll always be there. And like I said in a documentary that was broadcast to the English people, that is my sentiments exactly. I don't care what they do with Stansted. It can be London's first international airport. Whatever they do with it, it'll always be my memories of the base that we flew from during these days of World War II in 1944. This is the way I saw it, as one of the group, one of the boys, just hanging in there. That's about it. Goodbye for now. Thank you.